The infinite effects changes technique, commonly and incorrectly referred to as the infinite assigns technique, is the single most powerful function of the Novation Launchpad Pro MK3 when used in a Loopstation battle context with the Boss RC-505mk2. This trick involves using assigns to control each of the 8 individual input and output effects. Where the Launchpad comes in is using MIDI CC as the source of the assign, which allows you to set up buttons to precisely jump to whichever effect you want, whenever you want, and however many times you want. So why would you want to do this? Typically, when you make a Loopstation track, you will use multiple effects at the same time to alter sounds. The best combos of effects often use 4 effects in series, such as the MH snare or granular delay basses. The RC-505mk2 has a feature where you can double press and hold the edit button, allowing you to switch between the 4 different banks when the button turns blue, which you can pre-program with all of your combos. But even still, you'll get through these really quickly and have to start manually changing the effects, which is incredibly difficult live. With the typical setup with the Launchpad, you'll see Loopstation artists have bunches of 4 buttons next to each other. What these do is tell the Loopstation via assigns what to set the A, B, C, and D to respectively, which allows you to essentially have an unlimited number of effects banks. So how do we set this up? On the Loopstation, press the menu button, go to the right with the right arrow, and then press the second knob to go into assigns. Here you can see all of our 16 assigns for the memory. I've made a handy graphic to show you exactly how to set up all the assigns, so feel free to pause the video and copy them exactly into your Loopstation and then save the memory. Also make sure to drop a like on this video so you can come back to it later. I like to use a template with these 8 assigns as a base to build most of my songs. So what you can do is save this to one memory on the Loopstation, and then if you press exit and enter to write, you can use the first knob to change which memory you save it to. So say you want to start a track on memory 10, just turn the knob to 10, press enter, and it will save that template to the 10th slot, so you can start building from it, and not have to manually program all of the assigns in again. So the way this technique works is setting up a separate MIDI CC number to control the 4 input effects type and track effects type parameters. So MIDI CC1 controls input effects A, MIDI CC2 controls input effects B, CC3 is C, and 4 is D, and then CC5 to 8 control track effects A to D respectively. The mode is set to moment because we're going to set the Launchpad up to do the toggling. Action low and high are set to 0 and 50 respectively for all the assigns, apart from the 5th one, which is controlling track effects A, which as you'll know has an extra 4 effects that aren't available on the other effects channels, those being beat scatter, beat repeat, beat shift, and vinyl flick. The reason we've set the low and high to these values is to make it a lot easier to program in. There's 51 effects total, and we've got a value range of 0 to 50, so each effect perfectly lines up with a value. So a value of 0 means LPF, 1 means BPF, 3 is high pass filter, and then all the way up in order to 50, which is reverse reverb. Now, I don't expect you all to memorize the effects in order, which is why you should consult Mr. ESUOH'S MK2 guide, which I've linked in the description, and has the value numbers which you should use for each effect. Here it is on screen. So the basic premise is now what you can do is open up Novation components and create a button for every time you want to change one of your individual effects. You set the CC to correspond with whichever effect you want to change, and you set the value to the number next to the effects that you want to change it to on Mr. ESUOH'S chart. So let's go through an example to make sure you've fully got it. Let's say you want to set input effects C to distortion. Input effects C is the 3rd button along, so we'll use MIDI CC3. We create a button in Novation components with the pad mode as trigger, the CC as 3, and then we quickly consult Mr. ESUOH'S MK2 guide and see the distortion is effect number 23, so we put that in the value section, and now we can send this to the Launchpad, go to the custom page we sent it to, and as you see, this button changes input effects C to distortion. Just to really drill home the point, let's do another example, this time with an actual effects combo. Let's do an MH snare, which if you don't know is a high pass filter into lo-fi, into another high pass filter, and then another effect on the end like an EQ or a reverb. So let's use a reverb for this one. So in Novation components, let's pull down 4 buttons next to each other so we can press all 4 at the same time with our 4 fingers. Let's set them all to trigger, and then we set the CC numbers to 1, 2, 3, and 4 for input effects A, B, C, and D respectively. So as we said, we want a high pass filter as effect 1, so we set the first button's value to 2, and then on B we want lo-fi, so consult the sheet again, we see that the value for this button is 6, so we input that in the value. Now we want another high pass filter on C, so we set the 3rd button's value to 2, and then finally we want a reverb on input effects D, so we set the last button's value to 48. Now we save this and send this page to the Launchpad, and voila, we can press all 4 buttons at the same time, and they set our effects to the MH snare ones. If If you followed these examples yourself and it's still not working, let's quickly troubleshoot it. Firstly, check that your Launchpad is connected correctly, with a MIDI cable going from the Launchpad's out port to the Loopstation's in port. If that didn't work, go to the menu, go right one, then go into MIDI and make sure the control receive channel is set to the same value as the buttons you've made on the Launchpad's MIDI channel. By default, they're both set to 1, so this shouldn't be an issue. There shouldn't really be a reason why you should change this channel from 1 anyway, so I'd set it back to 1 if you're not using it for something else. Also, make sure you've put the correct values into the Launchpad's custom page in Novation components, with the pad mode as trigger and the correct MIDI CC and values. Finally, if that isn't working, go back to Assigns and make sure you've copied the exact settings I've put up on screen. And also make sure that you've turned on the Assigns by turning the knobs, which should show you that you've turned them on. One super quick final thing to remember is that this technique is essentially like if you could pause time and then turn the knobs to change the effects to whichever ones you want. If you're doing 2 effects combos and they happen to use the same effect in the same position, i.e. your synth lead and your snare both have a reverb on input effects D, they'll have the same parameters. If you want to use different parameters for the same effect in the same position, you'll have to change banks. So now you're armed with this knowledge, get out there and get creating. Unless you're watching this video without a Launchpad, in which case you're really not going to want to miss my next video. I have a real treat for you guys. So drop a sub if you want to see that, and I promise I'll make it worth your time. Once again, thank you very much for watching. The support you guys have shown my channel is super inspiring. And if you really want to go the extra mile, you can buy me a coffee in the description. Please check out my other videos if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one. Adios.